The bloodsport begins. The intergalactic arena was more than just a battlefield. It was a place of entertainment, bloodshed, and power. Alien warlords, crime lords, and the galaxy's wealthiest elites gathered here to watch the weak die and the strong survive. Tonight was no different. The stadium roared as the main event was announced. A spotlight beamed down on a small figure standing in the center of the pit. She was young, weak, fragile compared to the monsters that ruled this place. Her name was Zora. And tonight, she was going to die. The last of her kind. Zora's chains clanked as she took a step forward. The cold metal cuffs around her wrists reminded her that she was nothing more than property. Sold, traded, and now thrown into the arena like an animal. The announcer's voice boomed through the stadium. Behold, the last survivor of a dead race, a prize for tonight's bloodbath. The crowd cheered, eager for slaughter. Zora clenched her fists. She had no weapons, no armor, no allies, no chance. Across the arena, the gates opened. A massive four-armed gladiator stomped forward, dragging a heavy axe behind him. His skin was dark red, his eyes filled with hunger for the kill. The execution had begun. A silent watcher. High above, in the stands, one figure remained motionless. A man. A human. His name was Commander Rourke. And unlike the others, he wasn't here for the show. He was here for her. Humans were rare in the galaxy. Small, weak, not warriors. But Rourke wasn't like most humans. His eyes followed Zora's every move. He could see it. The fire in her eyes, the will to survive. But willpower alone wouldn't be enough. She was going to die. Unless someone stopped it. Unless someone broke the rules. Rourke's hands clenched. His heart pounded. And then, he moved. The moment that changed everything. The red-skinned gladiator raised his axe. Zora's breath caught in her throat. She had no way to dodge. The crowd roared, ready for the kill. And then, something impossible happened. A blur of motion. A crash of metal. The gladiator staggered back. Standing in front of Zora was a man. A human. Rourke. The stadium fell silent. The announcers froze. The galaxy itself seemed to stop. No one, had ever jumped into the arena uninvited. This was madness. Suicide. Rourke didn't care. He turned his head slightly, eyes locking onto Zora's. "Can you fight?" he asked. She hesitated. Then she nodded. "Good," Rourke said, cracking his knuckles. "Then let's show them what humans can do." The challenge. Up in the grand VIP box, Overlord Krasek leaned forward. The warlord's reptilian eyes gleamed with amusement. A human had just interrupted his games. A human had just defied him. A slow grin spread across Krasek's scared face. "Interesting," he muttered. The announcer regained his voice, shouting into the mic. "We have an unexpected challenger." The crowd murmured, confused at first. But then, they began to cheer. They had come for blood. And now, they were getting a show. Krasek stood, raising his hand. "Very well, human. You want to fight." His voice rumbled through the arena. He pointed at the massive gladiator who had been moments away from killing Zora. "Then you will face him. If you win, you both live. If you lose, your bodies will feed the beasts." Rourke smirked. "Sounds fair." Zora stared at him, stunned. Was he insane? A human couldn't win against an elite gladiator. But something in his eyes told her the truth. This wasn't just a fight. This was a statement. A challenge not just to the gladiator, but to the entire galaxy. The first strike. The red-skinned gladiator roared, raising his massive axe. He charged, swinging down with the force of a meteor. The fight should have ended in an instant, but it didn't. Because Rourke moved, faster than anyone expected. He sidestepped, ducked, and twisted at the last second. The axe slammed into the ground, sending shockwaves through the arena. Gasps echoed from the audience. A human dodged that. Impossible. But Rourke wasn't done. He spun around, fists clenched, and struck. One punch, right into the gladiator's jaw. The impact echoed across the stadium. The red-skinned warrior stumbled. A human had just hurt him. For the first time in his career, the gladiator looked afraid, and the crowd exploded. Fight, fight, fight. The war had just begun. Overlord Krasik's grin faded. This human was different. This was not entertainment anymore. This was dangerous. He turned to his guards. Prepare the next fighters. In the arena, Rourke cracked his knuckles, his confidence unshaken. Zora looked at him, eyes wide. "You're insane," she whispered. Rourke grinned. "You're welcome." The gates of the arena opened once more. More enemies stepped forward. Bigger, stronger, deadlier. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting started. The first fight. The arena shook with the sound of thousands of voices screaming for blood. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and the scent of battle. Rourke stood tall, fists clenched, his breathing steady. Zora was beside him, chains still hanging from her wrists. She had never seen anyone like him before. A human had just knocked a gladiator to his knees. The crowd had never seen anything like this before. But the fight was far from over. The gates of the arena rumbled open once again, and this time, the real slaughter was about to begin. The next challenger. The first enemy had been powerful, but predictable. The next one. It was something else entirely. Out of the darkness, a massive cybernetic beast stomped forward. It was 8 feet tall, its body a mix of steel and flesh, glowing red eyes, clawed metal hands. The announcer's voice boomed. Presenting the Maule. The beast lifted its head and let out a deafening roar. Rourke rolled his shoulders. "All right, that's new." Zora's eyes widened. "You can't beat that thing." Rourke smirked. That's what they said last time. The crowd was hungry for blood. And Overlord Krasik, watching from his VIP throne, smiled. "Let's see how long you last, human." The battle began. The Mauler attacks. The beast charged. It moved faster than something that size should be able to. Rourke barely had time to react before a metallic fist came crashing toward him. He dodged, but not fast enough. The impact grazed his ribs, sending him skidding across the dirt. Pain shot through his body. This thing was no ordinary gladiator. It was a war machine. The crowd erupted with excitement. Zora watched in horror. This time, he might not get up. The Mauler stomped forward, raising its claws for the kill. The human fights back. But Rourke wasn't done. As the Mauler's claws came down, he did something no one expected. He ran toward it. Zora gasped. "What are you doing?" Instead of dodging, he slid under the monster's attack, grabbing a handful of loose wires hanging from its cybernetic torso. Then, with a savage yank, he pulled. Sparks exploded from the Mauler's side. The beast stumbled, roaring in confusion. The crowd gasped. Zora's mouth fell open. He was outthinking it. The alien spectators had seen warriors fight with brute strength, but never with strategy. And for the first time, some of them weren't cheering for the Mauler. They were cheering for the human. The arena changes. Overlord Krasik's eyes narrowed. This was dangerous. Humans weren't supposed to be warriors. They were supposed to be weak, inferior. But this one was inspiring something worse than rebellion. Hope. And hope. That was a disease that could spread. Krasik leaned forward and barked an order to his guards. "Send in the rest. Kill him before the crowd starts believing in him." The gauntlet begins. The Mauler wasn't the only threat. The gates of the arena opened again. This time, 3 new challengers stepped forward. A 4-armed warrior, each hand gripping a blade. The venomous reptilian assassin, moving like a shadow. and a massive brute with spiked armor, standing 10 feet tall. The crowd lost its mind. 4 against 1. A human should not survive this. But Rourke only smiled. He turned to Zara. Stay close. Watch and learn. The impossible fight. The first attacker, the 4-armed swordsman, moved in, blades slicing through the air. Rourke dodged left, ducked right. Too fast, too precise. But he didn't need to block the swords. He just needed to get close enough. And when he did, he grabbed the alien's wrist and twisted. Snap. The crowd screamed as one of the creature's 4 arms broke. The alien staggered back in shock. That's when Rourke grabbed the fallen sword and drove it straight into the second attacker. 1 down, 3 to go. The moment everything changed. The assassin struck next, venom dripping from its claws. Rourke moved fast, blocking the strike, but the venom grazed his arm. Pain shot through him. The poison was already in his blood. Zara saw it. He was slowing down. If he didn't finish this fast, he was dead. But Rourke did something no one expected. He grabbed the assassin's wrist and slammed its own claws into its throat. The creature's eyes widened. And then it collapsed. 2 down. The arena falls silent. The final 2 challengers hesitated. They had never seen a human fight like this. The crowd was no longer just entertained. They were in awe. For the first time, they weren't cheering for the aliens. They were cheering for him. Overlord Krasek felt it. The shift in the air. This wasn't a normal fight anymore. This was the beginning of something dangerous. The warlord's decision. Krasek clenched his jaw. He had to stop this. Now, this wasn't just a human fighting for survival. This was a human proving that survival was not enough. That he could win. That humans could be more than prey. Krasek slammed his fist down, growling an order. Release the champion. The guards hesitated. But my lord. Do it. Krasek roared. The arena's final gate opened. A massive shadow stepped forward. Larger than any fighter before. More powerful than anything Rourke had faced. The real battle had just begun. The champion enters. The arena had never been this silent. Thousands of aliens leaned forward in their seats, their eyes locked on the human standing tall in the blood-soaked sand. He should have died by now. He hadn't. Instead, he had slaughtered the best fighters the arena had to offer. And that was a problem. The final gate opens. Overlord Krasek's patience had run out. The crowd was no longer laughing at the human. They were cheering for him. A human. That could not be allowed. Krasek's claws gripped the edge of his throne as he barked the order. Release the champion. The ground trembled. The final gate groaned open. A shadow stepped forward. And for the first time, Rourke felt real danger. The champion of the arena. The creature was twice his size. Black armor covered its entire body. Not metal, but something alive. Its head was hidden behind a jagged war mask, but its eyes burned red. The champion of the arena. A living weapon. The strongest warrior in the galaxy. And now it was staring directly at Rourke. A history of death. Zara froze. She had heard the stories. This creature. It had never lost a fight. It had destroyed entire species. It didn't just kill, it erased. And now it was here for Rourke. Zara turned to him. We have to run. Rourke cracked his neck. There's nowhere to run. The champion took another step forward. Then it spoke. Its voice was deep, guttural, ancient. Human, you do not belong. The crowd went dead silent. No one had ever heard the champion speak before. Rourke exhaled. Guess I'll have to prove you wrong. The first blow. The champion moved. It was fast. Faster than something that big should have been. It closed the distance in a blink, fist flying toward Rourke's head. Boom. The impact hit like a starship cannon. The sand exploded beneath them. Rourke flew back, crashing into the wall. For the first time, he felt real pain. The champion wasn't just strong. It was beyond anything he had ever faced. The crowd's reaction. The crowd screamed in excitement. They had almost believed in the human. But now they remembered their champion. Overlord Krasek smirked. It's over. Zara's heart pounded. No, not like this. She turned toward the dust cloud where Rourke had crashed. He wasn't moving. She took a step forward, desperate. Rourke. Then, from the rubble, a voice. Low, rough, still standing. That all you got? The fight of legends. Rourke staggered to his feet. Blood dripped down his face. His ribs felt cracked. But he was smiling. The champion tilted its head. No one had ever survived its first hit before. Rourke rolled his shoulders. My turn. Then he charged. The impossible battle. The fight that followed would be told in stories for centuries. The champion struck like a monster. But Rourke fought like a man with nothing to lose. Every blow should have killed him. But he dodged, blocked, adapted. The champion had never faced a human before. And that was its weakness. Rourke wasn't stronger. He was smarter. He outthought his enemy. And inch by inch, he turned the fight in his favor. The final strike. The crowd was no longer chanting for the champion. They were chanting for Rourke. For the human. Overlord Krasek saw it, felt it. This was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. He roared in frustration. End this. The champion lunged, its fist glowing with energy. One final attack. Rourke didn't move. He stood his ground, waited. Then, at the last possible second, he sidestepped. The champion's fist slammed into the ground. Crack. The arena itself split open. Rourke saw his chance. He grabbed a fallen blade from the sand, and with everything he had left, he drove it into the champion's exposed throat. Silence. Then, the champion fell. The human wins. The entire arena went still. The champion was dead. The human had won. Overlord Krasek's claws dug into his throne. This wasn't just a victory. This was a revolution. Rourke stood over the champion's corpse, breathing hard. Then, he turned, locking eyes with Krasek. A silent message. I'm coming for you next. The rebellion sparks. The champion of the arena was dead. The crowd should have been roaring in celebration. Instead, there was only silence. Thousands of aliens stared at the fallen body of their undefeated warrior, and at the human who had just killed him. For the first time in the arena's long, blood-soaked history, a human stood victorious. The moment that changed everything. Rourke stood over the champion's corpse, breathing heavily. His body was broken, his knuckles raw, his ribs screaming in pain. But he had won. And he wasn't done yet. He slowly turned his gaze upward, locking eyes with the warlord sitting on the grand throne above. Overlord Krasek. A silent message passed between them. You're next. Krasek's claws tightened on his armrests. He had underestimated the human. That mistake would not happen again. The Overlord rose from his throne and raised one hand. A simple command. Kill him. The arena turns against him. The guards stationed around the Colosseum moved instantly. Rifles powered up. Blades were drawn. Dozens of elite enforcers stormed the battlefield. Zara grabbed Rourke's arm, eyes wide. We have to run. Rourke wiped the blood from his face. He shook his head. No more running. Then what? We fight them all. Rourke cracked his knuckles. Yeah. Zara stared at him in disbelief. Then she smiled. All right then. She picked up a fallen blade. The crowd gasped as the enslaved fighter who was meant to die now stood beside her rescuer. Together. Ready. The fire of rebellion. The guards charged forward. Rourke and Zara met them head-on. The first enemy swung a blade. Rourke caught his wrist, twisted, and snapped it. A second attacker lunged. Zara ducked low and drove her dagger into his gut. The arena exploded into chaos. But something else was happening. Something Krasak had not planned for. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were cheering. Not for the guards. Not for the overlord. They were cheering for the human. And that was dangerous. The fighters rise. Across the arena, the enslaved fighters, gladiators, criminals, survivors, watched in stunned silence. For years, they had fought in these blood-stained pits. For years, they had believed there was no escape, that the arena was the end. But now, they saw hope. If a human could defy the overlord, could win, then maybe so could they. The first to move was a towering Rekthar warrior, a beast of muscle and scars, once broken by the arena's cruelty. He looked down at his chains. Then, with a roar that shook the stadium, he ripped them apart. The second fighter, a four-armed swordsman, grabbed a fallen weapon. Then a third, a fourth. One by one, the enslaved fighters rose. Krasak saw it, felt it. A spark of rebellion was catching fire. And it was all because of one human. The turning point. The battle shifted. Guards turned their weapons toward Rourke and Zara. But now, they weren't just fighting two people. They were fighting dozens. Rourke barely dodged a plasma bolt before a massive hammer smashed down beside him. He turned, only to see the Rekthar warrior from before. The alien nodded once. A silent agreement. We fight together. More gladiators rushed into battle. The arena was no longer a prison. It was now a battlefield. And the rebellion had begun. Krasak's fury. Up in the stands, Overlord Krasak watched in fury. This was not how tonight was supposed to go. The human should have died. The slaves should have remained slaves. But instead, they were winning. Krasak roared in rage. Then he slammed his fist onto a control panel. The ground beneath the arena shook. The lights flickered. And suddenly, a massive steel gate began to rise. From the depths below, a new enemy emerged. Something worse than the gladiators, worse than the champion. The arena's final weapon. And this time, there would be no mercy. The arena burns. The intergalactic arena was no longer a place of entertainment. It was a battlefield. Blood, fire, and chaos filled the air as gladiators turned against their masters. The rebellion had begun, and at its center stood a human, a species the galaxy had dismissed as weak, a species they had underestimated. But tonight, they would learn. Humanity does not bow. Humanity fights. And when humanity fights, humanity wins. The final weapon. From deep beneath the arena, the steel gate fully opened. The ground shook. The air vibrated. And then it stepped forward. A creature unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 10 feet tall. A body of shifting metal, glowing with raw energy. Its eyes burned with cold intelligence. And its voice, a voice that should not belong to any living thing, spoke one word. Annihilation. Overlord Krasak grinned from his throne. Now, human. Now you die. The battle begins. The arena rebels charged at the monstrous war machine. A dozen warriors, all fearless. They lasted 5 seconds. A single swipe of its massive arm sent bodies flying. A blast of energy disintegrated 3 of them instantly. The remaining gladiators hesitated. This was not a fight. This was a massacre. And then it locked onto Rourke. Human, it said, voice hollow. Target acquired. It moved like a storm. Faster than its size should allow. Faster than any creature Rourke had ever faced. The first attack came too fast to dodge. Boom. A direct hit. Rourke was sent flying across the arena, smashing into the stone walls. His vision blurred. Pain shot through his body. Something was broken. Maybe everything was broken. Zara screamed his name. The crowd went silent. Overlord Krasak leaned forward. Checkmate. But humans don't stay down. Dust and debris filled the air. Rourke lay motionless. The machine turned away. It had already dismissed him as dead. A mistake. A very big mistake. Because Rourke was not dead. And he was very, very angry. With a slow, painful grunt, he pushed himself up, one hand bracing against the cracked stone wall, his legs unsteady, his breath ragged, but his eyes burning with fire. The crowd saw him. And for the first time, they didn't just cheer. They roared. A chant rose from the stands. "Human! Human! Human!" Rourke spat blood onto the ground. Then he looked up at the war machine. "My turn." The human strikes back. The war machine turned, tilting its head. "Impossible. You should not." Rourke was already moving. Not running. Not attacking head-on. Thinking. He scanned its movements. Its speed. Its pattern. It was stronger. It was faster. But it was still a machine. And machines. They had weaknesses. A battle of mind versus metal. Rourke dodged the next strike. Then another. The machine adjusted. It calculated. But Rourke was not something that could be calculated. He changed his movements, his attack patterns. He became unpredictable. And the machine hesitated. That was all he needed. He dashed toward the fallen body of a gladiator and grabbed a plasma spear. The war machine charge. Rourke waited, timed it, and at the last possible second, he leaped straight onto the machine's back. He plunged the spear into its exposed energy core. A direct hit. The war machine shuddered. Sparks flew. Its systems glitched. And then it collapsed. The ground trembled as it hit the sand. The impossible had happened. A human had defeated the arena's ultimate weapon. The rebellion had won. The arena burns. The gladiators erupted in cheers. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Guards were overwhelmed. The overlords' forces collapsed. The arena, once a prison, became a war zone. And at the heart of it all stood Commander Rourke, the human who had defied the galaxy, the human who had won. Overlord Krasek stared in disbelief. His empire, his control, his power was falling apart. He turned, barking orders. Deploy reinforcements. Shut it down. Kill them all. But it was too late. This was no longer a fight. This was a revolution. And the galaxy was about to change forever. The final duel. The arena was burning. Flames and smoke filled the air as the rebellion raged. Slaves had broken their chains. Gladiators had turned against their masters. The stadium that had once echoed with cheers for bloodsport now thundered with the sound of war. And at the heart of it all, Commander Rourke stood, facing his final enemy. High above the battlefield, in his throne of power, Overlord Krasek rose from his seat. The human had done the impossible. He had defied the arena. He had defeated the champion. And worst of all, he had inspired others to fight. That was something Krasek could not allow. Not now. Not ever. The warlord descends. For the first time in decades, Overlord Krasek stepped down from his throne. His massive, armored form landed in the sand. The ground shook beneath his weight. He was twice Rourke's size. His body was enhanced with biotech implants. His skin, thick as steel. His weapons, forged from ancient alien warlords. And his eyes, burning with pure hatred. Krasek unsheathed a blade the size of a human torso. The plasma edge hummed with deadly energy. The crowd fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Overlord himself was going to fight. There were no rules, no tricks. This was a duel to the death. Rourke rolled his shoulders. He cracked his knuckles. And then he grinned. "I was hoping you'd come down here." A clash of titans. Krasek moved first, faster than anyone expected. He swung his massive blade, aiming to cut Rourke in half. Rourke dove to the side, narrowly escaping death. The impact split the ground where he had just stood. But before he could recover, Krasek was already moving. The Overlord was not just a brute. He was a warrior, a killer. He had fought in 1,000 battles. He had never lost. Until today. The duel of legends. The two warriors clashed in a brutal exchange. Krasek fought with overwhelming power, each swing of his blade capable of ending the fight instantly. Rourke fought with speed and precision, dodging, countering, finding weak points. Every move was calculated. Every second mattered, because one mistake would mean death. The arena watches in awe. The fight was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Krasek, the overlord of the arena. Rourke, the human who refused to kneel. For the first time, the crowd did not cheer for Krasek. They cheered for the human. Krasek heard it, felt it, and it enraged him. He slammed his blade into the ground, unleashing a shockwave. Rourke was thrown backward. He hit the sand hard. Krasek loomed over him, raising his sword. Enough, the Overlord roared. You are in no thing. And then he swung. The moment of victory. But Rourke was already moving. He rolled to the side, grabbing a broken spear from the ground. The Overlord's sword slammed into the dirt, stuck for a fraction of a second. A fraction of a second was all Rourke needed. With one final burst of speed, he lunged. He drove the spear straight into Krasek's exposed throat. The Overlord's eyes widened. The crowd gasped. The battlefield fell silent. And then, Overlord Krasek collapsed to his knees. Rourke stood over him, breathing hard. Krasek tried to speak, but no words came. Only blood. The Overlord of the arena, the ruler of this empire of death, was dead, and a human had killed him. The arena chooses a new ruler. For a long moment, nobody moved. The fighters, the slaves, the audience. They all stared at the human. Then one voice spoke, a whisper at first, then another, and another, until the entire arena erupted into a single unified chant. Human, human, human. A new era begins. Rourke turned, scanning the battlefield. The rebellion had won. The Overlord was dead. The slaves were free. The arena, once a place of death and suffering, was now under his control. He looked at Zora. She met his gaze, and she smiled. You just started something much bigger than you realize, she said. Rourke smirked. Yeah, I tend to do that. He turned back to the crowd. And then, in a voice that echoed across the galaxy, he spoke. The arena belongs to no one now. It belongs to the fighters, to the free, to those who refuse to kneel. No more chains. No more slaves. From this day forward, we fight for ourselves. The stadium erupted in cheers. The galaxy had changed forever. And at the center of it all, the legend of Commander Rourke, the human warrior, had just begun. The war for freedom. The arena was free. The Overlord was dead. The crowd had chosen its new ruler. But Rourke was no ruler. He had not come here to lead. He had come to fight, to survive. Yet now he stood on the battlefield, surrounded by warriors who looked to him for direction. The galaxy had changed in one night. But change comes with consequences. And far beyond this blood-soaked arena, a storm was coming. The broadcast that shook the stars. Across the galaxy, from the neon slums of Zi-49 to the towering citadels of the Imperial Core worlds, one message played on every screen. A hacked transmission, sent from the heart of the arena. The entire galaxy saw it. Rourke, standing over the dead body of Overlord Krasek. The bloodied human, standing tall as the new ruler of the most feared battleground in the universe. His voice rang through the stars. The arena is no longer a place for slaughter. The arena belongs to the free. And if you believe in chains, in empires built on slavery, in rulers who sit on thrones of blood, then know this. He lifted Krasek's massive blade and drove it into the ground. Your time is over. The message cut out, and the galaxy erupted into chaos. The Empire strikes back. The Galactic Dominion, the oldest and most powerful empire in the known universe, was watching. For centuries, they had ruled with an iron grip, and the arena had been a symbol of that power, a reminder to every species that only the strong survived. Now, a human had shattered that symbol. That could not be allowed. Inside the throne halls of the Dominion High Council, the rulers of the galaxy gathered. A decision was made, a fleet was mobilized, and an order was given. Burn the arena to the ground. Kill the human. The battle for the arena. The freedom of the arena had lasted less than a day. The Dominion's warships arrived within hours. Colossal dreadnoughts, each the size of cities, swarming with elite soldiers, enhanced war beasts, and mercenary legions. Their goal: to erase everything Orc had built. The rebellion had started, but now it had to survive. Rourke's last stand. The sky darkened as the first warships entered the planet's orbit. The former slaves, once prisoners in the arena, now stood as free warriors. But they had no fleet, no reinforcements, only one battlefield, the arena itself. And so they fortified. The walls became barricades. The sand was filled with weapons taken from fallen guards. For the first time in history, the arena was not a place of slaughter. It was a fortress, and humanity would defend it. The first attack. The sky split apart as the first wave of Dominion troops landed. Heavily armed, ruthless, ready to wipe the rebellion out. They expected a slaughter. Instead, they found warriors. Rourke led the charge. His battle cry shook the ground. Gladiators who had once fought alone now fought together. Alien warriors, criminals, and survivors stood as one. And when the first Dominion forces clashed with them, they did not find easy prey. They found hell. The human war machine. Rourke fought like a force of nature, not with brute strength, not with overwhelming firepower, with tactics, with strategy. Every move was calculated. Every counterattack was precise. He outmaneuvered their formations. He turned their own weapons against them. The Dominion soldiers had numbers, but Rourke had something stronger, the will to win. And when a human fights for something greater than himself, he does not lose. The turning point. The battle raged for hours. The arena's defenders held the line. But the Dominion was endless. For every ship they destroyed, more arrived. For every soldier they cut down, another took their place. They could not hold forever. And Rourke knew it. Zara stood beside him, breathless. We can't win this, Rourke. He exhaled, wiping blood from his forehead. Not by fighting fair. She frowned. What do you mean? Rourke turned toward the sky. Then he smiled. We take the fight to them. The Grand Theft Dreadnought. The Dominion's flagship hovered over the battlefield. A floating fortress. Its shields were impenetrable. Its weapons could wipe out the arena in minutes. So Rourke did what no one expected. He decided to steal it. The final plan. With a small team of elite fighters, Rourke launched a desperate mission. While the rebellion held the arena, Rourke and his strike team infiltrated the Dominion dreadnought. One ship, one crew, one shot at turning the war. If they failed, the arena would burn. If they succeeded, the Dominion itself would learn what happens when they try to crush humanity. Because this war was no longer about one arena. This was a war for the galaxy. And the humans had just begun to fight. The war for the arena was over. But the war for the galaxy, it had just begun. Rourke stood at the edge of the battlefield, staring up at the Dominion warships blocking the sky. Behind him, the fighters of the arena stood free. But freedom meant nothing if they didn't fight to keep it. Zara stepped beside him. What now? Rourke smirked, gripping his weapon tighter. Now. He exhaled, eyes locked on the enemy fleet above. Now we show the galaxy what happens when you try to chain a human. The sky rumbled. The stars burned. And for the first time in history, the Dominion knew fear. The end